Hi, Lou. Welcome to Struggle to Strength.
Hello, Mary Beth. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am so excited to be here with you.
It took
Uh,
me forever to join you on your show.
I know. Well, I had to wait for you to come back to the US. That was the best timing.
Yes, exactly.
We'll talk a little more about that. So before we get started, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself in case you're joining us for the first time. And uh, my name is Mary Beth Simone, and I am the founder and CEO of Niche Partnership Consulting. I show entrepreneurs and professionals how to create contingency plans so that they are prepared to take an extended vacation or prepared for an emergency. And my business started as a result of a personal struggle. And I created this platform to share with people the struggle to strength stories of my guests, collaborators, and clients in hopes that it will inspire each of you to connect the dots between your struggle and strength story. So, welcome, Lou Blaser. So excited to have you on the show today. We are going to focus our conversation on how you found the strength of self awareness through the struggle of high functioning depression. So, before we dive into what our topic is today, can you just share with us a little bit about your background and your business?
Sure. So today I call myself a writer and a podcaster, but really that's my second act. For the longest time. For most of my professional life, really, I was a corporate person. I climbed the corporate ladder and enjoyed climbing the ladder. But these days, I own a small business that serves the midlifer market, people in midlife. I produce written and audio content to help midlifers, to help people like us navigate and thrive in our midlife and beyond.
That's awesome. And so I'm an avid reader of your weekly Midlife Cues newsletter. And interestingly enough, the episode that we recorded for your podcast a couple months ago was just aired in the last week.
Oh my
So I
God,
was
yes.
on your show and now you're on my
That's
show.
so
It's
true.
wonderful.
It's the
Yes,
Lou and Mary Beth week.
it is. And your podcast has been so instrumental in my journey going from corporate to entrepreneurship. So I'm just so grateful for the content that you share.
Oh, so glad to hear that.
Yeah. And so you and I met through Tara McMullen's network
Mhm.
and the What Works network.
Yes,
And that's how we connected. And I first got on your podcast.
yes, absolutely.
And since then, we have just developed a friendship as you have moved from the US to the Philippines to back to the US. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I caught you on your return, on the temporary return to the US. So our hours align to do this
hmm
show. So it's wonderful. Um, so, can you take us back, Lou, to 2006 and describe what you were experiencing that inspired you to seek help?
hmm So 2006 was when I sought help, when I first sat down with a therapist and when I was first diagnosed. But really, I've been experiencing depression. I just didn't know that that's what it was for most of my life. I always had this melancholic side, like there's a pervasive sadness that was just always there. And the sadness that wasn't really attributable to any specific event or anything happening. It's just like this pervasive sadness. And I, I didn't talk about that. I didn't know what it was. I mean, if I said anything about being sad to anybody, the question was always, why? What happened? And I could never really explain what was happening to me other than I just feel this way. And so I just never talked about it. And then um, uh, when you have a job, at that time I was in corporate America, when you have a job that required you to always be sort of like on for your clients, on for your team, on for the company, the leaders in your company, you kind of want to tend, or I tended to want to hide that sadness. And on top of that, I was very ambitious at that time. I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, and there wasn't anybody I knew who was climbing the ladder successfully who was also talking about sadness and depression. And so I'm like, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna be the one to talk about that. I didn't want anything to distract from the story of a successful corporate professional that I was, that was the narrative, that was the persona that I was portraying at that time, or that I wanted to show. And I didn't want to have anything kind of distract from the story. So I wasn't telling anybody anything. I was basically pretending, or performing was the word that I use now to explain it. But internally, I was suffering every day. I was, compartmentalization was a huge word for me, because that was code for me for being able, for saying this is that and this is the external phase, and those two never meet. I couldn't wait. I remember I couldn't wait to get home to shut the door of my apartment so that I could shut out the world and I could sit in a corner and cry, because that was always how I felt. And then in 2006, and I don't really remember a particular incident or event, but somehow I just felt overwhelmed, like over the top overwhelmed, more than I've ever felt. And I there was like this voice in my head that I could finally hear, that was yelling and screaming and saying, please get help, something is wrong. And so I went to see a therapist. I didn't ask for a recommendation from anyone, because if you ask for recommendations, so obviously why you want to see a therapist, right? And so I looked at my insurance plan. I looked at, okay, what's covered by by my insurance plan. And fortunately, the very first therapist that I saw, I clicked with her, thank goodness. And that was that. So I was diagnosed. That was the first time I got the diagnosis. It's officially, or I guess the official term for it is persistent depressive disorder, which is basically that. It's just there. It's not highs and lows. It's just there. It's a persistent, pervasive thing. You can think of it as like a constant hum in the background. And sometimes it's louder than other times, but it's always there. It never goes away. So that was that.
That's so interesting. So it sounds like it's a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably always a part of you.
Yes. Yeah.
So that must have given you a sense of relief to finally have a name for what it was.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I understood myself, I felt like, for the first time. And that I stopped, because at the time there was always this tendency for I had this tendency, and then when other people notice that I'm sad, they ask the same questions, like, what is wrong? What is going on with you? And I always felt this pressure to identify a rational reason for feeling sad, when really there isn't necessarily a reason. I could be getting promoted tomorrow and still be feeling sad. It has nothing, it's not connected to necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm just going to, for a moment, invite anyone who's with us live to let us know and put something in the comments. And if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer your questions. Yeah, so I think it's just wonderful when you can get a name for what is happening. I'm sure everyone has had that experience of you're trying to figure something out and you're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
finally,
exactly.
somebody can tell me what is going on here." Uh,
Yes.
I can't imagine what it took to manage your corporate responsibilities at the same time as experiencing, the symptoms that you were having. Um, so I wonder if, compartmentalizing actually can aggravate can actually aggravate the symptoms, because of putting on that brave face during the
Ah,
day and that
yes.
all the energy that it takes
Yes,
to show up.
especially when, I mean, I think it's one thing if your compartment, or at least let me personalize it. It's one thing if I understood what was happening and choosing to compartmentalize, but I didn't know what was happening. And I was just basically, I was very good at hiding. I was basically performing all the time. I remember one time explaining it to my therapist. I said that I felt like as soon as I step out of the apartment, I felt like I was live on stage. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I have this role, this character that I have to play. Um, and whatever it is that I'm feeling has to just, it had just wait until I get back home later that evening. And so I got very good at that. And for a while, it was the way that I coped, and it was the way that I managed myself and my life. Um, until, like I said, until I couldn't anymore. And then I finally went to see a therapist and understood what the heck is the matter.
Yeah. Yeah, so that must have been, like a great point to like have this understanding, to have the treatment that you need. But
Mhm.
then I understand that later in 2013 that you experienced a setback. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I first got diagnosed in 2006, I went to see a therapist. I was seeing a therapist, regularly and all that kinds of good stuff. Um, and then I had moved on. I moved on to another company, and I landed myself where I ended up in a very stressful work environment. And what proved for me, I'm not saying that this is all the employees of that company, but for me, it proved to be a toxic environment. I was overextended, way overextended. I was working 7 days a week. I was getting by with 3, 4 hours sleep a night, and they weren't even good, like restful sleep. And I was not taking a vacation. I wasn't having healthy relationships. I wasn't having any kind of relationship really other than work.
Yeah.
And I was busy, very busy. And so when you're busy, or when I was busy, the first things that fell off the plate were things that I had to do to take care of myself. So I stopped seeing a therapist because I had no time to see the therapist anymore. All the small self-care routines that I had managed to cobble together at that time sort of like disappeared. I wasn't on meds. So really, I wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't paying attention to whatever my body is trying to tell me. I wasn't paying attention because I was just focused on, this is the job I had to do, and I had to do well. I had to, basically excel.
Yeah.
Right. And then um, what happened? I don't actually, the series of events that happened, I can't remember the details anymore, or maybe I choose not to remember the
Yeah.
details anymore. But make long story short, I landed myself in a hospital. I
Oh,
found myself in a hospital, and the doctors there told me, we can give you meds, but if you don't do something about your stress level, your lifestyle fast, you're going to find yourself back here in no time, or worse. And this time I paid attention. I took it seriously. I got scared.
yeah, that's very
And
scary.
I took it seriously. And so when I got discharged from the hospital, I gave myself, I get not myself, my I gave the company that I worked for, I gave my 2 months notice, and that was I stepped away from my corporate life initially for a short-term sabbatical health, so to just recuperate, take care of myself. But that turned out to be a permanent walking away from my corporate career and the start of a new life, pretty much, and also the beginning of really understanding myself, really being serious about taking care of myself, and really coming up with self-care routines that I am committed to doing, and all that kinds of good stuff.
Oh, good for you. I mean,
Yeah.
in all the times that we have talked, we had our regular talks through the pandemic, and we've never talked about this before. So this
No.
is so great to have this insight. I never asked you the story of why you left corporate,
Mhm.
or what the events were. So
Yeah.
that's the story.
That's the story. It wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
When I first gave my notice, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't a permanent, this is it, I'm retiring from my corporate career. It was really, literally, I was just, doctor said this, and I'm going to take it seriously this time. I'm going to take 3 months off. And um, it turned
Yeah.
into 6 months, turned into 9 months, and turned into
The rest of your life,
permanent. Yeah.
this new life of
The
yours.
new life that I have now, yes. It is not to say that quitting corporate life is the solution to depression. This is not what I'm trying
No.
to say.
No, but I can totally relate to the demands of the schedule. Like,
Mhm,
when certain things are happening, you're in corporate, you're on.
mhm,
Like, and 7 days a week is not uncommon.
mhm.
Um, there can be a different perception for people who have not been in corporate of what it's like to be in corporate, but I can relate to your experience that there are times when, like, all of you is required. It takes your whole life for a
Yeah,
while, months at a time.
and I had a client-facing role, so there's no hiding in your cubicle. I was always on. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's a lot. That's a lot. Um, so can you share with us some of the self-care and self-awareness techniques that you developed as a way of managing your depression?
So self-acceptance is huge. It's like the foundation of everything, because I don't think, I mean, yes, I was diagnosed in 2006. It answered a lot of my questions, but I don't think in, on hindsight, I don't think that I actually took it that seriously until the setback happened, or there was still a part of me that was not accepting or was denying, or a part that this is a condition that I have. So self acceptance is really huge. It starts with understanding my condition, that this is just a part of my life experience, and that it doesn't help pretending, because I pretended for many, many years and it didn't help. In fact, it just got worse. So pretending doesn't help. Also, hiding or not telling anyone doesn't help. And so, I mean, I don't talk about depression all the time. It's still not the most, you know, um, vocal part of my story or visible part of my story, but there are a handful of people who now know that I do have this condition, and I do suffer from clinical depression, and that from time to time, the it's the noise or the hum is louder than other times. And so I now have a few people who I trust, who I tell basically, and I'm not looking for help necessarily. I'm not looking to be fixed or anything like that. It's just being able to tell someone, hey, it's on a bad turn, and that's it. That's enough. Just being
Yeah.
able to say that, and having someone kind of understand that that's where I'm at is good. And it's also safe, because all kinds of thoughts happen, or when you're on a bad turn. And so when someone understands that you're on that, you're on that sort of spiral, then there is someone you can talk to when,
Yeah.
really bad thoughts enter your mind.
Yeah.
But in terms of really like tactical self-care routines, number one is I prioritize sleep above everything else. Sleep is the most important thing for me. These days, it's non negotiable. It's good for my mental health. It's also good for our brains, people. As we get older, it's very important to, have good night's sleep. So, sleep's very important for me nowadays. I meditate first thing in the morning. I don't do long ones. I don't do like 30 minutes or anything like that. It's just like 10, 15 minutes every day, every morning. I do that. That's how I start my day. I I journal. So I do this thing I call brain dumping. So basically, I just kind of write all my thoughts on the journal, and it helps me clear my thoughts, my mind. And I heard someone say it's like a windshield wiper for the mind. So I think it was Tim Ferriss who said that. I forget who said it, but something along those lines. And I totally, for me, it helps me cope with the day to day, things that happen when I start with a mind that's not cluttered and noisy. Um, I catch the sunrise as much as I can. So this is one of those things that I stumbled upon that has been so helpful to me. So that means I wake up, when it's still dark outside, and I catch the day as it happens. I catch the sunrise, the day happens. And when I was in Florida, this is so much easier because I lived by the water. And so I would take my walk, do my steps, and then literally sit by the water and watch literally the sunrise over the horizon, which is fantastic. But I'm traveling nowadays. It's not always easy for me to do that, but I still do wake up, when it's dark outside, and I just basically catch the day as it opens, as it starts, and it fills me with so much hope and so much positivity. I can't even begin to explain how much this little thing has helped me tremendously. It's my little, silver bullet.
Yeah.
And then I I no longer see a therapist every week. I used to. I used to do twice a week, and then I graduated to once a week. And now I don't see her regularly, but I do from time to time. And like I top off, I see her from time to time. But I she made me promise that she is my first call if something, and we have codes for certain things that are happening with me, and I do that. So it's important to get help. It's important for me to know that I have that sort of professional help when I need.
Yeah, and, like, just to have the resources,
Yeah.
to have your resources in place, is key, and Heike said, "Yes, sleep is my number 1 too."
Oh yes, exactly.
And sleep is my number 1 as well. I would say, like, sleep, and then my food, like, I'm very, like, particular
Yes.
about my food because I have food allergies and stuff like that, so I have to be careful about it. And my workouts. And
Mhm.
and when any of that is off, it, like, changes my whole experience.
Right? Exactly. It's like you're starting the day on a negative already.
Yeah, right, and it affects my energy level and yeah. And so it sounds like I mean, and I do it for a medical condition that I have. And so it's like any medical condition that you
Mhm.
have. Those are like foundational things, but
Yeah.
I love that you watch the sunrise. And I think everyone that who I know who lives in Florida or has lived in Florida has basically the same morning routine as you, taking the walks and
Yes,
watching the
exactly.
sunrise. It's like the time to do it, right?
Mhm.
Um, so, as you're telling us that story, I'm thinking about, all of the things, the unexpected things that come up during life, and especially, I'd say like over the last 10 years, it's been a little bit of rapid fire.
Yes.
So how does that affect your wellness routine and and how you navigate the mental health needs?
So I will say that I have done since 2013. Um, I have done a tremendous amount of self-awareness work on myself to like really understand me and what my body tells me when it needs something, or what my mind tells me, what my emotion, my ebbs and flows, right? My
Yeah.
normal ebb and flow. And so now I understand what normal ebb and flow is for me. And so when it's not normal, I catch it pretty early in the spiral, which is great, because before I wasn't able to catch it early enough. But now I'm able to catch it earlier. So I'm able to double down on any kind of self-care routine, or, it doesn't go into that long depressive state, or I'm able to minimize it anyway. Um, but I'm only able to do this because I did a lot of self-awareness work for years in order to get to the point where I can hear myself. And by that, it's like, I'll give you an example. When I was in corporate America, I used to get hives all over my face, all over my body, and it's stress related, but I was never paying attention to it. I would laugh it off, and it's visible because it'll be like over my neck, my face. And I would laugh it off, and I would tell people, ignore it, ignore it. There's nothing. I mean, it's not important. Ignore it. I'm not paying attention to it. So I'm telling other people to laugh with me, or ignore it, not pay attention to it, because I am doing the same thing. I am ignoring it and not paying attention to it. Whereas, meanwhile, my body is like screaming, like, hello, there's a lot of stress in here. Pay attention to
Please
me.
notice me.
Exactly. So, but now you know what? I haven't had stress hives and for so long, knock on wood, right? And because I've learned to listen to my body now, to myself. One thing that I do, because, as you said, there's so many stressors out there. The last 6, 10 years has just been, especially if you live in the U.S., but I think if you live anywhere in the world, but especially here for us in the U.S., there's just so much stressors that can hit us from anywhere. And what I have learned is that I choose how and when I consume potentially stressful information. And I just don't mean news, because obviously news is a potentially stressful information data point. But any kind of potentially stressful information, I choose when and how I consume it. And that has been really helpful. So this is the reason why I don't have cable TV anymore. This is the reason why I canceled my Facebook account, because I want to be able to have control over when I let those kinds of things into my system, so that I know that I am in a good mental frame of mind. I know that I am able to absorb it or cope with it, because sometimes you just get hit. And like I said, it doesn't just mean news. I mean, you and I mean, we know, anybody who's listening right now, we have people in our lives who are energy vampires. We know who those are. We can't always walk away from all of those kinds of people in our lives. I have those people in my life too. And so I know when and how I, socialize with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of it is just, in general, boundaries from
Yes.
every perspective,
Yeah.
right? Like whether it's humans or media, and yeah,
Yeah.
in every way.
Yeah. Absolutely. We just have to help ourselves cope, basically. We have to help ourselves.
Yeah, right, right. We can't just let everything happen to us.
Hmm.
Like all
Yes.
of the inputs, we can't let them all in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So, I just want to switch gears for a moment, Lou, and ask you about the book that you're writing.
You and whoever's watching are the first people to hear about this development. So I originally intended to write a book this year about embracing midlife. That was the goal. And then I started working on it in January, and I wanted to tie it to the previous book that I had written, which is called Break Free, The Courage to Reinvent Yourself. I wanted to tie it to the first book, but then I realized that there is so much I wanted to say now about reinventing ourselves. So that's because the first book was very geared towards reinventing our careers. But in the 6 years since I've written that book, my perspective on reinventing ourselves have gone beyond just the career reinvention. And so I decided to rewrite that book. So basically, I'm working on the second edition of Break Free, and then I'll write the book about embracing midlife.
Okay, that makes total sense to me. That's
So
great.
that is what happened to the book project.
That's great. So now you have 2 book projects,
Right, exactly.
one current and one future.
Exactly.
So interesting. Heike is, she just wrote a book. So Heike is a photographer and her book launch starts tomorrow. I'll be
Oh,
joining her for
how
that.
fun. What is
Yeah,
the book
yeah.
about?
So it is about female athletes, but female
Oh,
athletes who look like people like me.
yes.
Yeah, uh-huh.
How
So,
awesome.
yeah, I'm excited
Congratulations, Heike.
to join her for that, the beginning of that launch. Um, yes, so can you share with us what's happening in your business and if there's anything that you're promoting in your business these days?
Well, I am very excited about Midlife Cues. You mentioned it earlier. It's a newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter that I write for people, midlifers, anybody who self-identifies as a midlifer, really. And it's about intentional living and being our best in the second half of our lives. And I started playing around with it in the beginning of 2020, but it really took form and shape towards the end of 2020. And I've just been really happy and excited about the growth in readership. And so that's just really, I want to invite you all who's watching to give it a try. If you go to midlifecues.com and give it a try. It's a weekly one. It's a every Sunday morning, right, Mary Beth?
I love the Sunday mornings. I have my coffee. I'm preparing to meditate. My husband's in his meditation chair next to me, and I say, "Do you know what Lou said?"
Exactly.
That's what we do before the meditation on
Right.
Sunday morning. I will put a link to Midlife Cues in the comments on each of the platforms. So if anyone wants to sign up, it'll be easy for them
Oh, thank you
to
so
access
much.
that. And what is the best way for our listeners to connect with you if they want to connect?
Well, LinkedIn
Yeah,
right here is really the best way to connect with me. Um, I am also on Instagram, but really LinkedIn is
that's me. I'm on a lot of places, but I'm really just on LinkedIn.
yeah, yeah. I am not the dancing TikToker person, so so really, LinkedIn is the best place. And of course, if you subscribe to Midlife Cues, then you'll hear from me every Sunday, and then you can hit reply, and we can talk on an
Yes,
email.
and I
Yes,
often hit reply and
yes,
talk to you about what's in there or say, "Oh, Lou, I just thought I wanted to." So, and she
yeah,
does get the emails and she does respond. So,
yes.
well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your personal story with us, Lou. I think that it resonates with so many people we all have something going on. And I think that it's just great reinforcement to hear how you're managing it. And it provides tips that all of us can benefit from.
Thank you so much for asking me to share my life and work experience, Mary Beth. And if I could just say one word, one thing to end this, I just want to say thank you so much to all the people before me who started to tell their stories about depression and how they're living with it and coping with it, because those people who, started to talk about their stories, they helped me find the words and find a way to talk about my own life experience. Without those brave people, then I wouldn't be able to talk about it myself. And also, if you have depression, if you're suffering from depression, no stigma, forget about the stigma, seek help, and, it's, find the one or two people that you could talk to, but really seek help. There's no reason to go through it alone, really.
Yeah. And it's so great to have a therapist in your back pocket. And
Yeah,
just like you were saying, Lou, you don't have to see her on a regular basis. I have a therapist. I love knowing that I have her number and I can call her when there's something going on and say, come on, let's get some appointments on the calendar. And that
absolutely.
it's like having a dentist, having a chiropractor, having, a GP.
Exactly.
And,
Yes,
it's just another tool in your toolbox. And
totally.
yeah. Well, thank you, Lou.
Thank you.